Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 5th episode of Kato's Anime Cafe, where every Monday we sit down and discuss anything and everything anime. I'm your host, Hoodie Song, as always, joined by my partner in crime, Zero. Today's episode is brought to you by the Tax Defense Group. Due to the global pandemic, the deadline to file your taxes for 2019 was pushed back to July 15th, 2020. If you haven't filed for 2019 yet, there's good news. The Tax Defense Group can e-file your taxes for you. The process is quick, and for millions of people, you will get money back. So, what are you waiting for? Call the Tax Defense Group today at 800-850-7973 to get started. That number again is 800-850-7973, and you can visit them online at thetaxdefensegroup.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Writer Junkie. Are you thinking about starting a business or a side hustle? For all businesses to be successful, you need a website. Writer Junkie offers website development, content writing, and SEO services for business websites. Call Writer Junkie today at 805-587-7966, and you can visit them online at writerjunkie.com. Again, the number is 805-587-7966, or visit them online at writerjunkie.com. Thank you to the Tax Defense Group and Writer Junkie for sponsoring this week's episode. Let's get back into it. Zero, every week on the Anime Cafe, we're going to be taking a look at some of the most popular threads on Reddit's r/anime and giving our hot takes on the conversation. Can you read us the first thread by MZ Bros?
Of course. He asks, what is that one anime scene you keep going back to? Basically, any scene that compels you to keep watching the series, why it stuck with you after a long time. Not necessarily your favorite scene, but a scene you admire a lot, and it's always kept in the back of your mind.
Now, I know, I only took a glance at the comments because the first comment was a spoiler for a show that I'm currently watching, Attack on Titan. Well, not a spoiler, but it alluded to something. So I didn't take too long of a look down there, but I did glance and see a comment that I know you want to talk about. So go ahead, tell me about Code Geass.
I plan to gush about Code Geass later in the podcast. I'm not going to stick with it right now. I'll talk about some other show.
Okay, go ahead. Give me one show, or give me a comment you like.
Okay, so what I actually wanted to talk about is Desert Punk. Now, Desert Punk, for the uninitiated, I know I've shown it to Hoodie like 10 times and he refuses to watch it. It's about like a post-apocalyptic Japan that is literally reduced to entirely reduced to a desert. And there are still like small sects of people who survive in this environment, and the main character is a bounty hunter slash mercenary who has the reputation of never not completing a job. Sort of like the Get Backers, except, they had the 99% thing. So he is basically like the best bounty hunter in the desert, and it just sort of like follows his exploits. Now, the moment that really sticks with me, really the episode overall that I think answers all of the questions this guy asked in his like little paragraph, is this episode where he's hired by this famous gamesman who made like billions selling what was like, they had recovered the Game of Life, the board game, and he basically sold that, made a buttload of money, and his plan was to go back to the deserted city where he found that game and get whatever he could. So he hired Desert Punk, and when they get there, they discover that this ancient city still has a protector. It's a guardian robot from before the fall of civilization that is still functional and is like killing anyone who comes into the town to like loot the ruins. So the episode basically becomes about Desert Punk versus this bulletproof, unstoppable killing machine. And the scene where he finally like gets him, it's so amazing. It's so, the sakuga, the smarts on display.
So let's categorize this a little bit. Are we talking, when we're talking best moments, there's moments I mean, let me give you a brief insight into one of my answers. Of course, we got to talk about Naruto. We talk about Naruto every episode. I
We
wrote
sure
down 2
do.
moments from Naruto that I thought stood out as the ones that I always end up revisiting, which are Madara's entrance and Kakashi versus Obito. I've talked about this on our channel a little bit, which is that these 2 moments emphasize some of the Naruto's greatest strengths, which is the emotional fight, the fight where we are getting flashbacks, where we are getting 2 brothers, clashing and all that emotional climax coming from it. That's Kakashi versus Obito.
Hell
And then the
yeah.
other one is Madara's entrance, which is just pure Sakuga, pure hype. It's just a one-man army taking down everyone in his way. It is not sad. It's not tugging on your heartstrings in any way. It's just making you go, holy shit, this is awesome.
Yes.
Which category are we talking about for Desert Punk? Is it more Madara's entrance, where it's just, this is hype?
Yeah, I'd say it's more hype. I mean, there's a lot going on in this struggle, but it's not really like an emotional beat for either character. It's more like sort of like the political implications of the encounter are what's like going on beneath the fight, so to speak. But I do mostly enjoy it on a hype, like Madara entrance sort of level.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Desert Punk, there's a video a long time ago by Digi who talked about like what is someone's inevitable favorite anime going to be. I don't know the exact context of this conversation, but she was basically saying that an anime that is popular and gets recommended to you on Reddit or something is never going to be the anime that you fall in love with. The thing you see everyone talking about is probably not going to be the anime that you attach yourself to entirely. These are anime, let me clarify, these are anime that you can love. These are anime that a lot of us do end up loving. But your
it's
favorite
not
anime,
the anime
you hold to your heart is always going to be the anime that you stumbled upon randomly, that you were flipping channels at 4 a.m. and it was on Adult Swim, you never even heard of it, or some DVD you found on the street, or your brother left it when he was moving out or something. It's always one of these really obscure pieces of things. Now, I've never actually experienced anime like that. Like, I've never actually, I wasn't really into Adult Swim at the time. I watched like Naruto and stuff on it, but I wasn't like super watching all the anime. I wasn't watching, most late night blocks. I didn't have any family that was into anime, so I'd never had that experience. But if I know anything about U-Zero, Desert Punk is this thing for you. It's the thing that for the entire time I've known you, which at this point is like nearly a decade, it's something you've always talked about. It's something you've always like defaulted back to as like, this is the anime I want to put on right now. We're just chilling at your house. You put on Desert Punk.
Definitely. Desert Punk is that near and dear to my heart. I mean, it's no Code Geass, but it is one of my top 5 favorite, most endeared anime. And the way I found it is actually one of the scenarios that Digi listed, which was, my brother had the box set and he just sort of left it lying around, and I was like, ooh, what's this? And ever since then, I've loved it. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm not gonna watch it, but I've seen at least some of it, so there's that. Like just through osmosis of hanging around you. Like I said, you put this on all the time, on like when we were in middle school and stuff. So I feel like I've seen a good amount. And certainly, hey, it's cool.
Whatever, man.
All right. I talked a little bit about my Naruto list, so I'll go ahead and skip to the next thing. Of course, we are recording this on Sunday evening. About 6 hours ago, the final chapter of Haikyuu dropped. Neither one of us have read it, and we're not going to spoil anything for the manga. We're not going to spoil the ending, but I'd be remiss to not talk about Haikyuu in relevance to amazing scenes. I have a Haikyuu tattoo. It is literally my favorite series, and I could not decide on one, because there are 2 final points in Haikyuu. That's how I'm going to break down the final points. There are 2 that are just so good that when asked to choose between them, my brain just starts melting. That's the final points of season 2 and the final points of season 3 versus Abujosai and Shiratorizawa, respectively. The highlights of Abujosai, is Oikawa doing that beautiful, beautiful off the court long set, pointing to his ace, saying, this is it. You get this, boy. And he freaking throws it all the way from out of bounds, and then he stumbles into the table, and then he's running back. He trips and falls, and the ace, the pure trust in his setter, the trust in this person he's been with since middle school to know that ball is going to get to him. He jumps up, he slams it, and that's not even the end, because then we get one of the best quotes in the series, which is one that I almost got tattooed on me, which is talent is something you make bloom, instinct is something you polish, from Okawa. And then it leads into this giant thing where every single player on the court is doing something. They're all contributing, and the music is so hype. Zero, tell me about why you love this scene as much as I do. And if you can't say that, then don't even say anything.
I do love this scene as much as you. I haven't rewatched Haikyuu in quite some time, unfortunately. So it doesn't stick in my mind quite as much as like the Tsukishima. Did I say his name right?
Yeah.
The Tsukishima scene where he finally like gets that big block on, what's his name? The guy.
You like the show, I swear. People, he likes it.
It's good. Listen, I don't even remember American names. You expect me to remember the names of Japanese characters who don't exist?
It's funny you bring up Tsukishima, because because that is a moment I go back to so often, and for some reason I was so pressed to find moments for this list, I didn't put it down. Because it's not the final point. It's the final point of one of the sets, but it's not the final point of the game. But I mean, Tsukishima is one of the best characters in the show, and that moment, definitely. It's the silence. He blocks it, and everything goes quiet because everyone's looking at him like, did that just happen? Did he just? Because Tsukishima as a character is one that never really. He was naturally good at volleyball due to his height, but he didn't love the game, or he specifically tried. He didn't really try because of experiences with his brother and whatnot. And that block, and especially when you go to the flashback where they gave us this flashback before the game, where someone asks him, "Can you block Ushijima?" And he says, "Of course not." And then we see that flashback play out to what happens immediately after. He says, "Of course not, but I think I'll get like 1 or 2 in." And then he does it, and it's, oh my god, what a great moment.
Yeah, so amazing.
The other point that I do think was on my list, that one definitely deserves to be on there. I forgot to put it on, but the other one is the actual final point of that entire, match, which was this beautiful where the Okawa stuff, the quote and the rally was all great for season 2's final showdown. The beauty of Shiro Torizawa's last point is the visual metaphor that they put, where Ushijima is grasping Hinata and Tsukishima's head and pushing them into the ground with his incredible strength, because that's what Ushijima represents. He is pure refined strength. He is the epitome of the perfect volleyball player in so many ways, and he's just holding them down and they can't do anything. And then slowly, as Daichi, I don't remember the exact things that happened, but Daichi like receives the ball, and then
he's like pushing up against
Asahi goes for like a back spike, and it's each character comes in, each one of the seniors comes in and lifts up one of Ushijima's arms, slowly releasing Hinata and Tsukishima from his incredible strength and grasp. And that visual metaphor, and all the players going ham trying to keep this ball alive. It's so god, good. It's so hard to choose between that and season 2's points. It's so good.
Yeah, it's amazing. I honestly like the visual metaphor that they like implement, and how it's like interspersed with all the crazy action. And Haikyuu, they got some amazingly good volleyball players. It's amazing. I wanted to
enough
talk
gushing about Haikyuu. We can move on to another anime. What's another thing you have on your list? Do you have any more scenes?
Yes, I have a scene from Death Note, actually. I mean, it's kind of hard to describe it as a scene. It's more like an episode, but
it's the entire 36 or whatever episodes of Death Note, really. I just keep
That's the one scene that I keep going back to every episode. That's actually true, but I was specifically referring to Light's encounter with Naomi Misora. To me, this is like one of if not the high point in the series, where he's like so maniacal and he's like right on the line of falling off of this perch that he's put himself on, where he's like above the law. Because if this girl just says anything to anyone, he's definitely going to be convicted as Kira, because he was the guy that Ray Penber was following, and she believes Ray Penber met Kira. So,
correct me if I'm wrong, but this is really Light's first grasp with like it's really about to all fuck up right here. Like, this is she was the closest at this point that he had gotten to getting caught.
Yes, certainly. I mean, Ray Penber wasn't even really a threat to him. Like, he thought he was ready to clear Light of suspicion before Light killed him.
Yeah.
So, Naomi Misora, she's like on to Kira, and he like has to try to get her name out of her without making her at all suspicious that he might be Kira. And just like the internal monologue and him just like panicking and freaking out, like, oh god, this is the worst, it's all gonna end here. It's amazing. And I really, the one thing I hate about this episode is that it cuts out one panel from the manga, and I have no idea why they would do this, but it like, I feel like it changes so much to just not have this small piece of information, where right after Light wrote Naomi Misora's name in the manga, he like does that thing where his face gets really sinister, and he has like this internal line about how like you gave up your name so easily, you're such an idiot, it's like you want to be killed. And it's like you really see just like how early on the Death Note had corrupted Light and turned him into this like evil monster. It's like,
yeah,
he becomes so like vindictive and like sadistic. It's amazing.
Definitely good. One of the things about Death Note is like, as much as the scenes where Light and L are showing pure intelligence is great, other scenes that are great from Death Note are where Light's back is against the wall, and it's almost like he's improvising. It's like he there's a plan there, but the plan's going wrong, and he has to fix minor stuff along the way. And those scenes, I mean, that's basically the ending climax of the entire show, which is like he's just desperately trying to get this plan back on track. Those moments are as good as anything. Those moments are just so satisfying to watch.
Yeah, it's why Death Note remains one of the greats to this day.
Well, I do have two more on my list. I kind of just want to go through them a little fast, though, because I do want to talk about the second Reddit thread, because we've been putting it off for 2 weeks. So the first one, I'm just gonna throw it out there. We don't need to talk about it, especially because it's One Piece, and some of it is stuff you haven't seen. I'm gonna say the characters who fought, but I'm not gonna say anything
not
else.
Listening.
Okay, no, I won't say the characters. I won't say it. All right, well, okay. The first one that we can talk about. Well, I'll just throw it out there. The marching to Arlong Park. Marching to Arlong in the Arlong Park arc is so hype. I mean, he puts the hat on Nami, and the epic music plays as they all slowly join in and go basically fight to restore their crewmates' honor. That is one of the best moments of that entire show. The other one, it's in the Water 7 arc. It's when two characters fight that you would not expect to be fighting. And that's all I'll say about that one. It's a great one.
Is it Luffy and Oolong?
Oolong?
Oh, that's a DBZ character.
You mean Usopp?
Yeah, Usopp.
Yes, it is Luffy versus Usopp. They fight in Water 7, and it is not only one of the best fights on like a mechanical level, it's really interesting. It's one of the best fights on an emotional level. Obviously, you can't have Luffy fighting Usopp without it being this emotionally devastating Kakashi versus Obito type fight.
Yeah, and you're right that I haven't gotten to that one yet, but regarding the Arlong moment you mentioned, when those two bounty hunters are like holding off an entire army, because like, no, you'll all just die, But then Luffy shows up with a squad, and they're like, "All right, they handle this."
It's so much respect being paid to that moment. The other one, you have seen this anime. You have not gotten to the end though. You only watched the first couple episodes with me, which is Yuri on Ice. There's lots of stuff we've talked about so far is like fights, and the fights are really easy, and then same thing for like Haikyuu with matches are really easy to revisit. The thing Yuri on Ice has going for it is that music is really easy to revisit, and the one I always end up rewatching is King JJ's final performance. Do you know anything about King JJ?
I do not remember King JJ.
You did not meet him when you were watching. I just want to know if like maybe you heard about him. King JJ is me. It's me put into an anime. So basically, King JJ is this pretty good skater who, when the main not the main character, but like the main senior character retires, everyone suspects he's going to be the number one. That pressure ends up getting to him, and he stumbles a lot. And the thing about King JJ is most ice skaters just pick a song. They'll, a classical piece, a popular, band or whatever. They'll pick a song and they'll create a routine to that. King JJ doesn't do that. King JJ instead works with the Coldplay of this universe and has them write a song for him specifically about him being King JJ. I'm not going to read the whole lyrics out, but I'll read a couple excerpts, 2 excerpts. The first one is, "I look in the mirror, the king looks back at me." And the second one is, "Whenever you feel all alone, never shed a tear. If you always hide your pain, you'll make it through the rain." And it's like, what is the message? It's like, just never show any pain whatsoever. It's just bear that pain. It's okay. Just hide it all. Just bury your emotions inside of you. And it's this confident character who gets to the final national stage and he just messes up so bad, and he's not making any of his jumps. And we're talking about visual metaphors. There's the metaphor of him slowly plummeting off of this giant ice mountain, basically, knowing that there's no chance he's going to win. And then all of a sudden, every single person in the crowd starts chanting, and they start singing along to the song. And they're all just singing about King JJ with tears streaming down their face. And he pulls it together, and he doesn't win. It's too late. He's already made too many mistakes. But he finds strength in his peers. He no longer is, hiding his pain. And he, salvages the performance to some degree. And it's this incredibly emotional thing. And I love King JJ. King JJ is the best anime character ever made.
I don't know. None of that sounded like, oh yeah, that's Hoodie to a T.
Oh, I just think overly confident character. That's all I was going for, basically. I just think when he says, "I look in the mirror and the king looks back at me," that's what happens when I look in the mirror. The king looks back at me.
Okay. I respect it.
All right. Get us through your list real quick.
I actually only wanted to mention one more moment. So after that, we can move on to the next thing. But it's the first game from Hikaru no Go. I don't know why I'm talking about Hikaru no Go today, but the first game that Hikaru plays against his rival for the rest of the series, Akira Toya, is really fun. I just really enjoy going back and watching it.
Great. Is this... No, I'm thinking of March Comes in Like a Lion. I don't think I've ever seen Hikaru no Go. Is the famous chess grandmaster Hikaru named after that?
I do not know, but I would assume not.
Okay. It could be... I mean, he is Asian, so it could just be a coincidence, but I
think he's older.
An interesting coincidence. Yeah, that sounds right. All right. Well, that is anime scenes we just can't let go of, and we always revisit. The other Reddit thread, which we've been putting off for weeks, and which we will only be able to spend a little bit of time on because we're already running close to 30, is by Servant Ruler, who says, "What is your favorite first episode of an anime?" And he says for him it would be Yu Yu Hakusho. Now, I created a very long list, but I'll just have to go through a couple of them. I did put Haikyuu on here. I feel like a lot of people don't really agree with me. I don't think people complain about Haikyuu's first episode. I don't see many people talk about it, though. And to me, Haikyuu's first episode is like a perfect short story. Like, it is so good and so encapsulating of what this series is. It's when I fell in love with the show. And for some reason, that doesn't seem to be the case for everyone else. And I don't really know why.
Do you want to go to your next thing?
Nothing to say about that.
No. You expect me to be surprised?
Wait, okay, I love IQ, alright? Well, okay, fine. The next one, I'll throw you a bone here. The next one on my list, of course, is Death Note. Death Note has an amazing first episode, arguably a perfect first episode.
I was also going to bring up Death Note. I think the first episode is amazingly strong and kind of underrated because Death Note sort of does the same thing as Legend of the Galactic Heroes, where they show you this one character and you're like, ooh, I love this guy. This is a good guy. But then they bring in the other guy and it's like, whoa, this is a great guy. So,
what a description. This is beat for beat what Death Note's first episode is like.
So, yeah, I think the fact that the first episode is dedicated to Light sort of like not tarnishes, but like people sort of hold the second episode in higher esteem. But the first episode is definitely amazing.
And they're good back-to-back watches. I mean, no one's watching Death Note week to week, so I mean, it has been out long enough that we don't have to do that. So
yeah.
The other one on my list, I actually kind of wanted to throw this out there. I don't know if it will always be on my list, but it is on my list right now because I just recently watched it, which is Kill la Kill's first episode. Have you seen Kill la Kill?
Yes.
I have not, for some reason. I've obviously known about it. There's no way you don't know about it and watch anime, but for some reason I just never got around to it. And I decided a couple weeks ago, or rather a week ago, I was just going to throw on the first episode, and oh my god, that was amazing. That was like an amazing episode. One of the best first episodes I've ever seen, actually.
Have you finished the rest since then?
No, I've gotten really busy with existential dread and depression, and I haven't gotten around to it. But once I get out of that, man, you just wait.
Relatable. I never finished Kill la Kill season 1 either, so let's just never finish it, and we can have that in common.
Yeah, why watch good anime when we could just watch the next thing on my list, which is Sword Art Online? Now, I know what you're saying. This isn't a good anime. Really great first episode. I don't even, like, I'm not saying it's one of my favorite first episodes, but just the jarring aspect of, like, its first episode is so good, in my opinion, and then immediately it's just really bad completely from there on. So I just had to throw it on my list for, like, what a thing that happened there. Whereas, I don't know if you remember watching the first episode of Sword Art Online, but I thought it was genuinely great.
Yes, I actually do remember you having that reaction, and I think you've said this before, probably other people have too, that the reason Sword Art Online was even so popular before it, like, the anime community turned on it was just that goodwill from the first episode, which was honestly like a lot better than we were expecting going into it because we knew the series was trash. But then the second and third episodes, which we watched together as well, we could see, like, okay, the quality is starting to slip. But I also understand why someone who was like watching the show week to week would continue to hold on to that hope.
Yeah, because the thing is, even the second and third episodes, there's a definite drop in quality, but they're not terrible. And it's just from there, like right after the third episode, I just feel like it just goes terribly. And like by the 9th episode, I'm looking at like the bony back of a bare-skinned lolly, and it's like I don't even know what's happening right now, and I don't like it anymore.
So, your favorite first episode of all time, SAO? That's on the record?
Yes, I'm putting that on number 1. Sword Art Online. And just in the genre of isekai, I also did put No Game No Life. I don't know if I'd always keep this on, but I do think No Game No Life has a pretty, like, I think it sets the world in a really hype way, where it's just the concept of these two siblings who never lose a game. They're the best, and they get challenged, and then I think it is the appeal of isekai to a T, where it's just these absolute neats displaying their skills in the most useless in real life, perfect for this one world type of way. And it's a really great show, and I think the first episode is a pretty good encapsulation of that.
Yes, and I want to add on that the effect of like them living in the real world and then going to this like vibrant alternate dimension where they like start falling from the sky. It's like, geez, this is a real big shift, and it definitely sort of like excites the viewer for what's going to, or for this journey that these characters will be going on.
Yeah. I do have two more, but I can just throw those out really quick. But first, before I do that, I want to get to your list, at least some of your list. Go ahead and throw a couple first episodes at me.
So I mentioned Legend of the Galactic Heroes, and that was going to be the next... Well, that was going to be the first show I was going to bring up. And like I said, it starts with a little bit of history, which it's all right. That's sort of... I can see people like tuning out during that part, but then it gets into the whole like space war aspect, and the dialogue between Reinhardt and Kirkiais is it's like thoughtful, sort of philosophical, and you like hear that they're outnumbered 2-1 and they're surrounded on 3 sides, and he has to like answer to his subordinates who all want a fucking mutiny because they think they're certainly going to die. And he's like, all right, everyone, shut up, I got this. And he just starts handling the situation. But then they introduce our boy Yang, who's like, just barely manages to like rip the victory from Reinhardt's hands. And it's just such an excellent introduction to a rivalry that is unmatched.
Yeah, we've talked about Legend of the Galactic Heroes a surprising amount for this podcast.
Yes.
It's not something that stuck with me too much. I honestly got through the first episode. I didn't drop it or anything, but I couldn't get much beyond that. And you talk about that info dump at the beginning with, all the history.
Yeah.
That definitely threw me for a loop. And then it was just the amount of characters we were introduced to in such a rapid pace threw me for, kind of a bit much for where I was at that point in time. But even in saying that, I could see a world where, going back to our first question a little bit, scenes we want to rewatch, where if I had seen the show and if I knew who all these characters were intimately and I had that relationship with them, then even someone like me who doesn't vibe with that first episode, I could see, almost like the way we talked about Death Note earlier, being really satisfied with it, being like, seeing everything you see. And I just feel like maybe without that, I wasn't getting it.
Yeah, it's something that, like, as someone who is, like, in tune with the show, seeing it for the first time, I was like, this is really good. But seeing it for the second time, I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah. All right, give me another one from your list.
I only have one more, so you can get through the rest of your list.
All right. The two I just want to throw out real quick is I did a whole review of it last week, and I know it was a controversial opinion. I like Japan Sinks a lot more than most people, but I think even among the people who didn't like it, and of course there's going to be some element of recency bias here, it was the latest anime I just watched. The first episode of Japan Sinks is, almost universally agreed that episode is great. And maybe I'll take it a step further and say that is one of the best first episodes of all time. I think if the entire anime, like, I like the anime, I will admit that it had its faults and that it did not live up to the quality of that first episode. If every episode was as good as that first episode, indisputably the best anime of the year. I don't even, it is, we still have 6 more months. It does not matter. Japan Sinks would have been number 1 because that first episode was so good.
Yeah, I didn't even think to mention it, but Japan Sinks episode 1 is definitely dope.
100%. The other one that I have on my list, that just a quick shout out, I don't remember if you've seen it, but Death Parade's first episode is really, really good. And the beautiful thing about Death Parade is that it is mostly episodic. There's a couple like 2-parters, but basically any episode of Death Parade could be a first episode. And despite that, the first episode of Death Parade is particularly great. It ends in this weird, not necessarily like a twist way, but it ends with the characters being sent in directions you didn't necessarily think they would be, and it doesn't necessarily call attention to that. It doesn't say like, whoa, look at this crazy Twilight Zone twist. But it does get you thinking, and it's a very interesting show.
I actually remember us talking about Death Parade, and that the end of the first episode sort of like sparked a conversation between us about whether, or like the criteria they use to decide whether someone goes to the void or reincarnation. And you like brought up the point that the void might actually be the good place, because we assume there's like a good place and a bad place, and it's never stated that the void is the bad place.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in the show that doesn't get mentioned. They don't really, it's not something that they specifically seek to explore, and there is a little bit of visual clues that the void, on top of just being named the void, isn't necessarily the greatest place. But taking into consideration general Buddhist philosophy and the idea of reincarnation in the Buddhist religion, it at least seems plausible that reincarnation to Buddhists is this idea of you are an imperfect soul, and reincarnation is just another step until you eventually reach nirvana. It's not necessarily that this person did a bad thing, so they're going to hell. The sort of read I had when first going through the show was that it's possible that this person made enough mistakes that it was deemed they should take another go at this to eventually reach nirvana. And alternatively, the person who showed a lot of selflessness or other, idealistic virtues, they are going to the void as a complete human being. It's, when you think about it like that, there's still other questions of like, well, then why did this person go here and why did that person go here? And it's
yeah, it's actually more confusing when you like pick a side.
Yeah, it's something the show doesn't really talk about. So honestly, sitting with it more now, that was an interpretation I had when I first watched the show. Sitting with it more now, I sort of find myself leaning to the idea of that it is kind of just random, and random to us as viewers, because I think the specific idea that they're going for is that this is a process that goes beyond mortal understanding, and that it takes a very specific type of thought process that is not capable for humans to decide whether or not someone goes to a good place or a bad place. That is something that seems perhaps more accurate to intent, but I still think the Buddhist lens of reincarnation put onto this show is interesting to talk about at the very least.
Yeah, at least worth examining. And I think you're probably right. They're probably just using criteria that is like unknowable or unrecognizable to us.
Yeah, something like that.
Now, the final item on my list, I teased it earlier. Of course, it's Code Geass. Is the best first episode ever.
1 second, Zero. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I'm just gonna have to cut you off there. No, go ahead. Tell us about Code Geass. Tell us about the greatest show in the universe.
The greatest show in the universe. You heard it from Hoodie. So, what I love about this first episode is that it sort of, like, represents everything that makes this show, like, great to me. To begin with, we have the gambling of Lelouch, who's, like, just super bored. He wants something more out of life than he's getting from, like, the traditional lifestyle that he leads at school. And the dialogue between him and Rivals is it's philosophically informed, a little bit deep. I mean, Rivals isn't really the sort of person who can have a conversation with Lelouch on his level, but we get to a little bit of a look into Lelouch's thought process, and there are also many like independently moving parts, even in the first episode, that all just sort of intersect at that moment when Lelouch is like knocked into the crashed truck, and sort of trapped with that C2 capsule, which honestly sort of feels like fate, because he is the specific person that C2 wanted to give Gios to, and even though she's been sort of kidnapped by the Empire and lost any sort of agency, they still sort of end up finding each other. And then Suzaku, his like friend from 7 years ago, just shows up out of nowhere. It feels like the universe aligning to create this opportunity for Lelouch to get Gios. And it's just, I really love it. That's not even getting into like the him actually sort of deciding to become Zero and lead the rebels in war against Britannia, which super fun. The strategy on display is great. And
if you don't mind, I'd like to sell something that you haven't talked about yet, unless you want to talk about it. Do you know what I'm referring to?
I don't think so.
Code Geass has a reputation for being a bit loosey-goosey with rules for chess. There's an infamous scene, we all know
Sure.
where the chess pieces are just flying all over the board. Who knows what's happening? And it gets it gets goofed on for it. And, you know,
deservedly so.
Sometimes it deserves it. Yeah, exactly. But in that first episode, in that one of those first scenes, there's a chess scene, and more importantly, there's a chess analysis by the one man most qualified to give it. By Zero, my partner in crime himself. In our video, How Lelouch Led with the King, perfect title for a perfect video, where Zero breaks down, off of just a couple screenshots of the board, how this board thematically encapsulates the entire series in Lelouch as a character. So,
yes,
when we're talking about chess, we're talking about chess anime, we're talking about chess anime YouTubers, you can't go without mentioning Code Geass, and you can't go without mentioning Zero. Because if you haven't seen it, the detail, the analysis, the play-by-play, it's all there with Zero. He kills it in this How Lelouch Led with the King video. So please, Zero for the AnyTube chess tournament. That could be happening, might not be. I don't know. Get him in there.
Please get me in there. I don't know why I'm not already in there. I should be number 1 on the bracket. But yes, the best first anime episode of all time, or first episode of an anime of all time, is my video, The Man Behind the Mask, How Lelouch Led with the King.
Why watch Code Geass when you could just watch Zero's video?
Yeah, just watch my content.
Alright, is there anything left to say about... I mean, there's so many things left to say about Code Geass. Is there anything left to say for this episode about Code Geass?
We're already way over time, so let's just cut it off here.
Alright, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Kato's Anime Cafe. I want to give a quick shout out again to this week's sponsors. Thank you, Writer Junkie and the Tax Defense Group for sponsoring the Anime Cafe. And thank you to everyone listening. Sorry, I got that weirdly messed up. You can catch us uploading every Monday to UCast Studios' YouTube channel or your favorite podcast apps. I've been your host, Hoodie Song, joined again by the chess grandmaster at heart, Zero. Until next time.
さよなら。